Good evening and welcome. It's so wonderful to see everyone here tonight. I'm Krista McNamara, your town clerk. Thank you. My role as town clerk is to open up the RTM meetings. So this evening, May 9th, for our budget meeting, most important meeting of the year. We have 68 of currently 98 members present, which constitutes a quorum. I'd like to have the meeting start, handing it over to your moderator, Seth Morton.
Thank you, Krista. Welcome home, everybody. Here we are. The first item is acceptance of the agenda, and without objection, I will do that. Is there any objection? Hearing none, I will accept the agenda. Next is approval of the minutes of April 18. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes, please? Thank you. You get that, Krista? We have a second. Great. Are there any corrections, additions, changes? Yes. Did you have one? No. Oh, okay. Corrections, additions? Seeing none. Ready to vote? With your approval, I would accept a voice vote of approval. Are there any objections to doing that? Okay. All in favor? Aye, please. Aye. Okay. Noes, please. I hear none. If you have an abstention, you could give it to Krista later. I see no or hear no abstentions, but you could give it to her later. Minutes stand approved. Just brief announcement. This is the biggest budget in the history of the town. It's complicated, but I think you're going to find that if you listen and just kind of stay concentrated, you'll learn a lot about how the town finances are to get put together here for this year, and what the interrelationships are between the various operating entities and the money that they spend. So to kick this off, we'll have a budget introduction by Jack Davis, Chair of the Finance and Budget Committee. You see, we have Jack with his own computer and his own setup. It's the only way we could do this. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you. I've worked with Seth for many years throughout the RTM, and we've actually known each other much longer through soccer. The only thing I'll say is that for all the years I've done it, every year is the biggest budget this town has ever passed, because I've never seen it really go down. I understand that some of you want a very short meeting tonight. So for those, the mill rate's going to be 17.23, an increase of 2.32. The town remains its AAA rating, and all is good in Lake Wobegon. So for those who are watching on television, if that's all you wanted to know, go watch one of the sports teams. For others who recognize that in towns like Greenwich, Fairfield, Westport, and Darien, towns that have both a Board of Finance and an RTM, both the Board of Finance and the RTM are the budget-making authorities in those towns. So we have a bit of work to do to complete our duty and responsibility. And to complete this task, it's probably incumbent upon us to discuss unassigned fund balance, budgets versus the Board of Finance guidance, capital reconciliation, debt, and a reconciliation of the mill rate. What is requested versus the ending position? For me, it's one of our last items, but it's really a story worth waiting up for. A number of years ago, F&B started to focus on what's requested, because when we get to the mill rate, and I'm going to speak and not read so much, when we get to the mill rate, the top part of it is the budgets, and those are controlled by the Board of Finance when we're talking about debt, the Board of Selectmen for the operating on the town side, the Board of Education on the education side, and both of those other boards when it comes to what capital we're doing. The bottom is a grand list. It's based upon market. We don't control that. So if we want to control what ultimately our increases are, we have to focus on what the requests are. And we actually started this one year because we noticed that both the town and the Board of Ed had increases of about 2%, but our taxes were going up by 3%. It was a reval year. And then we realized that it was because of the reval and the fact that we had a lower grand list, which created the increase in taxes. So that's one of our focus. I'm told it's always best to start at the beginning. So I want to remind everyone that in December, the Board of Finance presented guidance for the fiscal year 23 operating budget. 2.5% core growth, 3% total growth, providing there was a compelling case. And I promise you, the 3% was not on the mill rate, it was on the operating budgets. Both operating budgets, however, are increasing by more than 3.7%, much greater than the 3% guidance. In fact, the amount needed to be raised through taxes is 4.5% higher than the current fiscal year 22. Yet, someplace between that 4.5% and the mill rate increase of 2.32%, things happened. And that's part of what we'll be talking about. We will be trying to address core versus growth for the Board of Selectmen and Board of Ed areas. We'll also be addressing the activity for the current year budget. It has a significant impact on this year's budget. We'll discuss debt, where we are, where we're going. And during these discussions, I hope to make some observations and recommendations. And those that know me, besides the fact that I have a dry sense of humor, know that I can be quite candid at times, and I intend to be. However, the focus is really on how to improve our entire budgeting process and thus the financial well-being of our town. With that, I'm going to hand it back over so we can get to the first resolution.
The first resolution is 12-11, appropriation of $2.9 million from the unassigned fund balance. Speaking on behalf of the Finance and Budget Committee, again, Jack. Thank you, Jack.
Now I get a little more formal. I'm Jack Davis from District 3, Chair of the Finance and Budget Committee. I move RTM Resolution 2211, RTM Resolution to consider an appropriation of $2,900,000 that will allow an additional contribution from the general fund to the reserve for capital and non-recurring expenditures. Do I have a second? Yeah, that's, Krista just let me know because I can't see that far. And I have my glasses on, so. The Board of Finance, if there's no objections, I waive the reading of the resolution. It's rather long, so the Board of Finance, upon reviewing the anticipated budget balance for the unassigned fund balance of the general fund as of June 30, authorized to transfer from the general fund to the reserve fund for capital non-recurring expenditures for the purpose of funding capital projects in 23. Just a little brief education, and I apologize for this. The town maintains assigned fund balances, most of which are non-budgetary funds, to account for revenues and expenses related to specific activities, such as the Board of Ed Student Activity Fund, the Fire and Police Commission's Park and Rec, storm recovery, and various state and federal grants, to name a few. In addition, there's assigned funds who also maintain, such as the Reserve Fund for Capital and Non-Recurring Expenditures, which handle our capital accounts. There's a fund for bond proceeds when we clear them, parking funds, sewer funds, and a new Park and Rec Special Revenue Fund. All of these funds are considered assigned to their specific purpose. And it's important when the rating agencies, they're looking at assigned balance versus unassigned balance. I think to understand this resolution, I want to talk about what's on the screen. And I apologize to people in the back row. We did an eye test earlier, and none of us passed. So I know that these numbers are very hard to see. So I'll try my best to go through it. At the beginning of the year, and I round numbers here at this stage of the game. At the beginning of the year, we had $26 million, and the general fund represented 17.03% of the town revenues for fiscal year '22. During the course of the year, the RTM has approved a myriad of projects. This one actually is now out. Pardon me. This is one of the corrections I just had about 15 minutes before I came here. We approved the Crimmins purchase. We approved FEMA grant application, the library truck, Tilly Pond watershed drainage, Baker Park baseball backstop, which came to about $308,000, which is deducted. Here's the area that provides some concern. Projected revenue surplus sans the Park and Rec program fees is $1.2 million. That's far too much. And it's on a topic that F&B had requested be increased last year during the preparation of the '22 budget. And it's the town clerk revenue, because we anticipated that the revenue associated with the sales of homes were going to continue in the current year. The expense surplus is going to be $1.3 million, which is a little bit tricky here because there was significant turnover in several of the departments' retirements that unless the town knows about it, they can't record the change in salaries. And the town doesn't have a turnover account, which the Board of Ed does, that can account that there's going to be natural turnover during the course of the year. So that's part of it. We also didn't issue debt when we anticipated, so that saved us about $90,000. By the way, when we did issue the debt most recently in February, it has increased the next year's budget by $111,000 based upon the change of the rate, but that's accounted for. There's also the closeout of all our contingencies. We give the Board of Finance a contingency of $250,000. Anything that they don't use is closed out into this fund. So on the expense side, it's a little bit hard. The Park and Rec revenues, if you net the two, we're about $200,000, and that's not a problem. That's kudos to our Park and Rec department for the programs that they've done, that for the second year in a row, they're blowing the socks off the programs and people are appreciating what our programs are. And so that's good that we have that revenue. We will be back in June to do the same thing we did last June because they have so much revenue, they don't have the appropriation for the expense, so we have to do that. And because of that, we're changing and moving it all into an expense revenue account so we don't have to do this on an annual basis. The last part is projected revenue for the Board of Ed surplus. About 590 of that is associated with the excess cost reimbursement. Part of that is that they had a higher rate. They also had 6 more students that weren't anticipated. On the contra side, Connecticut only pays for private schools of which they approve. There may be 1 or 2 that we have children at, which meets those children's needs, but are not approved by the state, so we're not getting reimbursement for them. The other thing is about $100,000 for other expenses. I want to go back to the Board of Selectmen. If you look at the Board of Selectmen budget, it's approximately about $35,000. You have to, we can even start at the higher thing, but they're not responsible for debt. That's a Board of Finance thing. You have to take away the library. And then if you net it against revenues, their net budget is really about $26 million. But over here, we have 2.7 coming back, almost 10% of what we budgeted, which means we overtaxed our citizens this current year. Now, the good thing is we're returning it. But going to the bad thing, that's not good budgeting. And we have to figure out how we get better at that. When you look at all this, the last thing that I'm going to say on fund balance is that there's a couple of numbers we like to keep with. The first one is fund balance. This is not the only money we have in town. Got to remember, we're going to tax in July, 70 million comes in, and you got to consider the general fund as being our checking account. So we're getting $70 million because we get a very good response rate in July in that. And we're sitting with probably about $90 million in the bank, which goes out because we pay debt in August and we have normal expenses. But this is what our net amount in this is for this account. And the goal is that we should never drop below 12%. If we do, we're going to be taxing to raise it back up. Guidance says about 15%. And you can see we started this year at 17. But the rating agencies really would prefer us to be about 16.5. And with some of the things that we hear, by giving and transferring some of the extra money that the town, and these are estimates, remember, because they're going to change a little bit, but giving that back to the capital account is allowing us to pay for certain capital projects. We're moving it into the capital reserve by 2.9, brings us down to a 16.55 to our revenues for the proposed 2023 year. Very much still within the agency. And it is returning the amounts that we overtaxed our citizens back. Not how I'd like to do it. But F&B met on this on August 6th, actually one day after the Board of Finance met on their budget, and we approved it unanimously and recommends the same to the full RTM.
Thanks, Jack. Are there any other committees that wish to report out on this item? Okay. Public officials, have any comments? Members of the RTM body? Okay. Members of the public? See none. We ready to vote? Fine. All those in favor, please rise.
I'm rising. My committee knows that I'm doing it. They couldn't see me back here anyway. We're all in the back.
No votes, please. I see none. Abstentions? I see none. Ready to move on to the next item. I'll recognize Jack to kick it off, and then I'll recognize Education, Planning and Zoning, Park and Recreation, Public Works, and Public Health and Safety, just to give all you guys a heads up. Okay? So the next item is 22-12A, appropriation from the Reserve Fund for capital non-recurring expenditures. And on behalf of Finance and Budget, Jack Davis.
I'm Jack Davis from District 3, and the RTM Finance and Budget Chair. I move RTM Resolution 2212A, resolved that an appropriation of $4,729,892 is hereby made from the Reserve Fund for Capital Non-Recurring Expenditures for the purpose of meeting expenses of the Town of Darien as shown by the budget this day approved, covering the period July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. Do I have a second? Thank you. This represents the authorization to spend on...
Yeah, who is seconding?
I see Cheryl.
Cheryl. Russell. Cheryl moved? Yeah, no, she seconded. Jack moves. He's the chair.
Yeah, I'm moving everything, other than education. Ed's moving that.
Yeah.
This represents the authorization to spend on a variety of capital projects that are not bonded. These capital projects are funded through taxes, transfers from assigned fund balance, or the capital reserve account. The capital reserve is controlled solely by the Board of Finance. At least twice a year, projects are closed, their residual balance either over original budget or under, are transferred into the Reserve Fund for Capital Non-Recurring Expenditures, Capital Reserve. The transfer we just approved to be also moved into the Capital Reserve, the $2.9 million, is going into the Capital Reserve account. So it's sitting there to start the next year. I'm going to address some things at a very high level. As Seth mentioned, the individual committees will discuss the individual items going. But I want to go over here. Last year, our request for capital was about $6.2 million. This year, because I know people heard, oh my goodness, we're up about 12%, we started about $9.4 million. $2.6 million of it was removed because they're for 3 fire engines that were moving off cycle. We will see them again, but they're not ready for prime time. To go and get this, and if you haven't seen the tour that was filmed by Channel 79 and coordinated by the Board of Finance, which I was on, it was a really great tour. It explains a lot of what goes on. When they order a fire engine, the specs for this is between 150 to 200 pages. They get down to the detail as to what the mill rate of wires that are going through this thing are. So it's not quite ready yet. When it is, it will come back, and we expect that it'll be bonded, but it's moved off cycle. Then this year, ARPA came, and we moved $576,000 of capital projects that was in the budget over to ARPA. Yes, we had a lot more, but those are the projects that we selected to do. But out of the existing budget, $577,000 was moved. We're bonding certain projects. They include some sidewalks, also the track at the high school. We're going to allocate, or the Board of Finance is going to allocate $100,000 from the Capital Reserve. We have in the past expedited certain appropriations, typically for the schools if they had to get a boiler, because they can't order the boiler till they have an appropriation. In this particular case, which we experienced when they lost trucks on Elsa, there's a problem with getting bus drivers. There's a problem with going on. It's part of the pandemic. People didn't have work. They left that job. They found other jobs. They are not returning. It's not just in Connecticut. It's nationwide. It's those of you who are out there hiring have experienced a lot of that when you're looking for people to fill certain spots. Anyway, they need another Suburban. It saves us a lot of money. But if we wait to the end of the budget, they can't first order it until July 1st. Since the delivery of these are far out, it means that they would lose about half a year. If we brought it to the RTM, after we vote on it, has to wait 14 days in order to do that. So it was moved to the Capital Reserve. They approved it, it's immediate approval, and $62,000 was approved in April so that the Board of Ed can put in an order, and hopefully by September they have this vehicle, because we're hiring a driver to drive that when we get to the Board of Ed, so it'd be nice that they have something to drive. The other aspects of it is, as we mentioned, we have the 2.9 coming in there, and I just want to show capital to be funded in the budget. If you look at the 2212A, that's the $4,729,892. We have 2.9 that's going against that. There's also revenues in the capital accounts, grants that we get from the state for roads and other things like that. We also have a rental for a property that's in there that gives us all of about $25,000. Net, you then have another amount of $1,296,219, which we're going to be dealing in the next budget item, but this ties them both together. F&B met on April 6th and voted unanimously and recommends the same to the full RTM.
Thanks, Jed, very nice. Next, recognize Ed Washeka for the Education Committee.
Hi, I'm Ed Washeka, District 3, Chairman of the Education Committee. The RTM Education Committee met on Monday, May 2nd, with 16 of 17 members present. The committee had also met and discussed the budget on several other occasions. At prior meetings, David Deneen, Chairman of the Board of Education, Dr. Alan Adley, Superintendent of Schools, and other members of the school administration had joined our meetings. The school system has two major capital programs underway that we're not discussing tonight. The construction of the new Ox Ridge Elementary, far down the path, and the preliminary spending and planning for improvements at Holmes, Hindley, and Royal schools. Both of these projects have been discussed, approved, and funded at prior meetings. Perhaps as one might expect with major school building and renovation programs underway, the capital budget brought forward to the RTM is comparatively modest. Total capital spending is $2.3 million against the Board of Education request of $2.8 million. The change was a result of moving the major project, high school track repair, to bonding and funding the vehicle that Jack just mentioned. As part of our review, the administration provided the committee and other town officials with a walking tour of capital projects planned in this budget request, as well as a progress review at the new Ox Ridge. Highlights from this year's capital budget largely relate to maintenance, given the age of our physical plant, and include elevator upgrades at Hindley, Royal, and Holmes for $420,000, partial replacement of the gym floor at the high school and at Tokenique for $103,000, replacing an oil tank at the high school for $350,000, masonry repair, a new driveway and sidewalk at Middlesex for $675,000, and then various heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and fire suppression repairs and upgrades at the central office and Middlesex for $445,000. These projects are all necessary, and most have been on the town's to-do list for years. The administration's capital requests were supported by the Board of Education, the Board of Finance, and by the Education Committee, which voted unanimously in favor of the appropriations for all the proposed capital projects.
Thank you, Ed. Next, Planning and Zoning Committee, Amy Barsanti, Chair. Okay. All right. Next would be Park and Recreation Committee, Adele Coniff.
Can you hear me with the mask on? I should take it off. Sound kind of better off? Okay, thanks. We can see you. Maybe I should put it back on. Adele Coniff, District 3, RTM Parks and Recreation Committee Chairman. This is 22-12A. The appropriation for the reserve fund for capital and non-recurring expenditures in the 22-23 budget includes $130,000 for park and recreation capital improvements, $100,000 for the Cherry Lawn tennis courts. The town appropriated $250,000 in 2021-22 to replace 3 tennis courts at Cherry Lawn Park with 3 post-tension tennis courts. The old tennis courts were found to be cracked, patched, and in need of replacement. When the project was bid, the funds were found to be insufficient due to an unexpected rise in material costs. $100,000 in additional funds were found to be necessary and are being requested in this budget. The project is expected to be done in August 22. An estimated useful life of the new courts is 30 years. $10,000 for replacing irrigation valves at Baker Park. The irrigation system at Baker is over 20 years old, and all 13 valves that direct water to individual zones need to be replaced. Replacement of the valves will extend the life of the irrigation system and help prevent leaks and water wastage. The project is expected to be done in September of 2022. Estimated useful life is 10 to 15 years. $15,000 to install ductless air conditioning in Weed Beach concession. The concession at Weed Beach gets so hot that the refrigeration and freezer have a hard time maintaining the correct temperature. Temperature inside the facility can be oppressively hot for the staff and puts the equipment at risk of failing. Currently, a box fan hangs from the ceiling to blow air onto the freezer. The AC will be installed in April 2023. Estimated useful life is 15 to 20 years, and $5,000 for small capital. Replacement of the playground at McGuan Park and installation of swings at Baker Park, originally in this budget, are being funded through ARPA. The RTM Parks and Recreation Committee met on April 6th with all 15 members present and voted unanimously to support the 2022-2023 Park and Rec capital improvements and asked the RTM to do the same.
Thank you, Adele. Next, Public Works Committee, Ralph Olben, Chair.
Good evening. My name is Rolf Oben. I live in District 4 and serve on the Public Works Committee as chairman. The Town of Darien Department of Public Works proposed capital budget for fiscal year 2022-23 is $1,665,000, an increase of 1.8% over the previous year. The larger expenditures are roadway paving for $1,200,000, the replacement purchase of a Freightliner truck for $225,000, and $100,000 for the transfer station drive curb replacement. The Department of Public Works has an ongoing program of road paving for 81 miles of road. This program enhances road safety and riding comfort. The truck replacement is part of a 5-year plan to replace the aging fleet of trucks and bring the fleet up to EPA emission standards. The new wash bay at the DPW garage will facilitate better care, is taken with the new replacement fleet, ensuring a longer vehicle lifespan. The Solid Waste Disposal Division operates the transfer station and manages the disposal of solid waste as well as managing the single stream recycling program, both major municipal services. This facility is trafficked every day. The drive curb is showing the wear and tear and needs to be replaced. The replacement will convey safer traffic flow within the transfer station facility. The RTM Public Works Committee met on April 7th with 10 of the 13 committee members present. The committee voted unanimously to approve the Town Darien Public Works Capital Fund for fiscal year 2022-23 and recommends the same to the full RTM.
Thank you, Rolf. Next, Public Health and Safety, Mac Patrick, Chair.
Hi, I'm Mac Patrick, Chair of Public Health and Safety. And it's nice to see our faces in here. It's nice to be up here. I'm a little out of practice for my public speaking, so thank you. But Public Health and Safety met in a special virtual meeting on May 4th, and we had 9 of 15 members present. We had a quorum, and we went over the capital items that Jack alluded to. We discussed primarily the police department has approximately $140,000 in capital items, and $75,000 of that are replacing police vehicles. The Darien Fire Department has approximately $61,000 in various projects. The Norotan Fire Department, $75,000. Norotan Heights Fire Department, $114,000. A group of us toured the 3 fire departments back in February, and really got a taste of what they're doing. There are really some good projects. Some of them are involved repairing the buildings, in addition to maintenance items. The fire marshal has a capital request of $76,800, and most of that is a vehicle replacement. Emergency management, $120,000. Public health is $20,000. That's primarily to institute a credit card system, so the public health department can accept credit cards like the rest of the departments at town hall. But everything added up is a little over $608,000, and we voted 8 in favor with 1 abstention to support this, and ask you to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Mac. All of the committees have reported, so I'll ask if there are any town officials. Any members of the RTM wish to speak? See none. Members of the public? I see none. We ready to vote? All those in favor, please rise. Item 22-11 passed. 70 in favor, 0 no, 0 abstentions. No votes? Abstentions? Okay. Next item is 22-12B. I'll recognize Jack, and then I'll do planning and zoning, park and rec, public works, and public health and safety. Speaking for finance and budget, Jack Davis.
I was supposed to do this earlier because there's a slew of slides up there, and the people on 79 do not know necessarily which one. So please go to slide 4. And I'm going to be moving through certain slides for 79. I'm Jack Davis from District 3 and the RTM Finance and Budget Chair. I move RTM Resolution 2212B resolves that an appropriation of $48,437,074 is hereby made in the general fund for the Selectmen's operating budget. Do I have a second? Oh, I see somebody. You got it?
I'm sorry. Jenny second?
Michael?
Michael's got it.
The Selectmen operating budget is comprised of 3 component parts: town operations and grants, debt service, and capital projects to be paid from taxes. Regarding the town operations, included in that total is the library grant, which is approximately $4 million. The F&B report will address a couple of things here. We're going to address the change in accounting that we need to do. Our committee is responsible for reporting on the library, and debt service will report on the debt service. Library grant is up by 2.7%. The town pays for the library operations. The Darien Library Friends pays for all books and materials and all capital initiatives. The lion's share of the library's expenses are salaries and bennies. There's a net addition of approximately 0.3 FTEs, and salaries are up 3.1%, including that addition. Benefits are up 3.24%, with the two largest increases being healthcare up over 4% and Social Security at 3.6%. The rest of the budget is of building ops and library support is actually flat year to year. The other thing that we're going to report on is that we're going to talk about some of the growth in that. And so I first want to start off with this slide. This is a breakdown of the various component parts of the budget based upon how you saw it. However, there's an accounting change here, and if we want to compare apples to apples, we have to change the accounting. And that is, we've removed the program expenses from the current year's budget. And as such, to do a fair comparison, we have to remove it from the prior year's budget. And so working with Jen Chinesky, there is $492,000 that was included in the current year's budget, 22, that we're adjusting to so we can do a proper comparison. And there was $354,000 of revenue, non-tax revenue, that we're also reducing. And from now on, we're going to be looking at the adjusted budget for Park and Rec. We only have to do it this year. Next year, we'll have year-to-year comparisons. But that drives the town budget from what it was at 2.19 to slide 5, where it shows that the town increases 3.79%. Please go to slide 6. So slide 6 is the total adjusted budget, which you see on the town side when we add in capital. The compared to the prior years, the full town budget is up by 6.2%, which is much higher than the 3% guidance we were given. So there's certain things I'm going to make a recommendation on now. I've spoken to members of the administration for both the town and the Board of Ed. I'm recommending that the Board of Finance meet with those administration people in November and discuss what's happening in their marketplace. They already knew that healthcare costs were going through the roof. They knew that there was going to be certain addition for staff. From there, develop your guidance. And as one of the members said, after you give the guidance, please give us the rationale for why you got there. And I'm going to add the other one. When the Board of Finance gives guidance at that State of the Town meeting, that's what F&B works off of. We don't come up with our own guidance and say, this is what the Board of Finance said. Well, if that's your guidance, I'm gobsmacked if you don't go back to it and reconcile what guidance you give to the final budget you're approving. And that was not done. Wasn't done for the Board of Ed, wasn't done for the town. That being said, I've worked with both the town and the Board of Ed to come up with what their drivers are and what the guidance are, and I'm now recommending that the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed adopt this document. And it almost started, they had some of it at the Board of Ed when the superintendent gave his document, but the superintendent's already seen the one that we're going to show later tonight. If you look at this, it very easily explains what is really driving these. And so we went through all the budgets. We happen to see various increases that are going on. What core is, that's the normal course of business. What growth is new things that are coming up, and the committees will talk about some of them. I'm going to talk about, because we elections happen to be F&B's responsibility. Because we redistricted and we have some nuances going on, there's some increase in elections. There's also an increase in legal based upon conversation that I had with Kate. So that's some of the growth area. But I want to go to the drivers. Because when I look at the drivers, and we'll talk about this in greater detail, there is a new IT position. We're going to talk about how the grand list grew, but there's responsibilities associated with that grand list. The fire marshal needed another fire inspector, and originally in the current year's budget, civilian dispatch was only for half a year. They made it for a full year, but when comparing it to the current year, that we have to account for it here, so there's the addition of the civilian dispatch. I mentioned the legal. Monica is aware of this, and so I'm going to do this gingerly. There's a lot of things that are offered in this budget. They're all nice projects. But not every blooming project is a #1 priority, especially when your budget is at 3.79%. And there's certain things here, and I'm not going to mention them because I told Monica I can't mention them, but she knows what they are, and it's actually a little bit humorous when I do. That had this mill rate been larger, I would have requested that we consider cutting them from this year's budget. Now, that doesn't mean we don't do it next year. And again, good projects, but not every good project can be done in a given year. So that's part of it. Park and Rec will be explained. The overhead on the benefits, some of the benefits associated with the new FTEs. Fuel costs are up this year. Go figure. And by the way, when I saw what they're paying for it, if anybody's been to a gas station and saw what diesel is costing at $5, we are getting a bargain with even what they're going. So kudos to Ed for getting what we are getting. Insurance premiums are up. Health insurance is up very high. It's surprising because it's been maintained fairly well at the town side. It's somewhat offset by a decrease in the police retirement medical contribution. But when I look at this, core growth represents 24% of the total growth, or an increase of almost 1%. And in fact, when I look at the total remaining growth of the town is pretty much almost close to core at 2.4%. But they got there partially because they've had such turnover in the police force and a couple other departments because of retirements. They've had a shift in the salary because you're not bringing in somebody at the same salary as somebody who left with a lot more experience and a higher grade. So that also benefited them to be at the 2.4%. Their growth is at 1.7%, which brings them to a total of 3.79. Most of this can be substantiated. As I said, they're good projects. We just, in the future, we have to prioritize what is priority one. And I don't believe it's the Board of Finance's job or the RTM's job to be setting these priorities. It has to be the boards to set them. On to better news. Debt. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussions on debt over the next couple of months. At the end of this year, we're going to be at $84 million in debt. I want you to note that over this time, over the next 5 years, we're going to pay off $30 million in debt. Our Board of Finance does an excellent job on this. They are really good in determining how to keep the debt at a certain level. We're trying to be about $10, $11 million a year, which means depending upon what the payoff, sometimes for the first year or two on new debt, we're not going to be issuing, paying off principal, and we're backloading certain things. We've gotten premiums on some of our debt because we are so highly rated based upon the coupon. We're using those appropriately. The Board of Finance does a really good job on managing our debt in this town. I should also mention, because we have about 18 million of authorized but unissued debt. And that will be after what we are going to call the May rescissions. When we do bonding, it doesn't mean the next day that they put a bond together and they go out and they collect the money. It can take 2 years before we're actually issuing. It can take even longer. Think about Oxbridge School. We didn't issue the $70 million right away. We waited till we did some things. We do original funding. Remember, we said we got a lot of cash there that we can advance things between funds. And then when we need to, we repay the other fund and we issue money, and it saves us some money over there. There's about $800,000 that will be rescinded. It means we authorized it, we didn't use all of it, we're not going to use all of it, so we're taking it off our books. We don't need it there, gone, away. That leaves us with approximately, after they do the rescission in May, about $18 million, $10 million of which is Ox Ridge, and I am told that we are not anticipating that we will use all or most of the remaining $10 million on the Ox Ridge project. So that's very favorable for us. Now, after we said that, which is all good news, let's be a little bit transparent. If you remember that other slide before, we talked about, I'm on slide 9 now, we talked about the fact that we have about 2.6 million in fire engines coming down the road. We talked that we have 1.3 million on bonding that we did from this year's budget that we'll be voting on in June. We also have in June that we'll be voting on the 3 school buildings. So we're going to be adding things to this debt. But again, on the fire engines, when we do issue them, sometimes we pay 25% up front, not always, but we repay the remaining amount 18 to 24 months later when the fire engine's delivered. So while we're approving the debt, we may not be issuing it for 24 months again. So timing is there. Same thing as what's going on with the schools. And on schools, while most of the rest of the debt is 20-year debt, on schools we're able to issue 30-year debt, which allows us to spread it out, keeps our debt service down. All those decisions are again done with Jen Chinesky, who's our Director of Finance, our bond advisor, and the Board of Finance, and they do a wonderful job on that. There is a debt graph here that I got from Jen, and let's see if I can find it. Here it is. This shows that our debt is going down. Now, it didn't have any of the other things that I put in there. But this is with the $30 million that we issued in February for the school, mostly on the school. But it does show that we've been managing our debt very well. And so there's, if you're looking at where we are, this is the monthly payments, then we're going to be about, in a couple of years, we're going to be at $4 million. So a big change, and that's good management by our Board of Finance, and we should be very thankful for the wonderful job that they do. With that, F&B met on the operations budget. I want to make sure that I covered everything. I do want to say it. I asked Jen what I should say on the rescinding, and I don't think I said it properly, so I'm going to say it from what Jen told me to say. The town currently has $18.8 million of unissued bond authorizations. Approximately $800,000 will be rescinded because the projects are complete and the authorization is not needed. Additionally, approximately $10.7 million of the amount is for Ox Ridge. We expect that the majority of that amount will not be needed. I just want to make sure that what Jen told me I'm doing, I've learned over the years. So that's where we are. We met on the 6th F&B and voted unanimously for the operations budget of the Board of Selectmen. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jack. Next, for Planning and Zoning, Amy Barsanti, Chair.
Hello, this is Amy Barsanti, District 1, Chair of Planning, Zoning, and Housing. The budget of the Planning and Zoning Department is virtually unchanged year over year. Additionally, the combined expenditures of P&Z and the Building Control Departments are approximately 1% of the town's Selectmen operating budget. Accordingly, I will keep the length of my remarks in proportion to the scale of this budget area. On January 13th, 2022, a regular meeting of PZ&H committee was held with 14 of 15 members present, representing a quorum. Jeremy Ginsburg, the Director of Land Use, presented an overview of the department's budget. Despite increasing demands placed on the budget due to the extensive project work currently being developed in the town, the requested budget is virtually unchanged over the year. One notable expense item are the consultant fees required for hiring Dave Keating to prepare the state-mandated affordable housing plan, which has a mandatory completion date of June 2022. The committee has been given in-person budget reviews and links to sessions and materials to study in more detail if warranted. There have been no concerns or objections to the budget presented by any member of our committee. We recommend to proceed with the budget as proposed.
Thank you, Amy. Next, for the Park and Recreation Committee, Adele Coniff, Chair.
Adele Coniff, District 3, RTM Parks and Recreation Committee Chair. 2212B, Selectmen's Operating Budget. Board of Finance approved the Parks and Recreation portion of the 22-23 operating budget is $1,652,832. Department revenue from beach parking permits, paddle courts, building rentals, facility permits, and tennis courts continues to be strong and is projected to be over $600,000. Program revenue, which continues to greatly exceed expectations, and program expenses are accounted for elsewhere in a separate fund. The Parks and Recreation Commission is focused on standards of care for parks and recreation facilities with a goal to maintain all at a uniform high standard. The Commission reviewed the parks in October, assessing where natural and landscaped areas, athletic fields, tree canopy, buildings and gazebos, courts, signage, and ADA compliance need improvement. This budget reflects a modest beginning to address these needs. The budget includes $18,000 for new plantings in the parks, reflecting the Commission's intent to improve the appearance of our parks. Also included is $8,000 for removal of invasive plants, which are endangering our tree canopy and crowding out our native plants at Cherry Lawn. These initiatives are likely to be continued in future budgets. Seed, fertilizer, and limestone material expenses have increased for our organic athletic fields at Cherry Lawn and Highland Farm. In addition, $9,000 is budgeted for contracted maintenance of the new plantings at Highland Farm. The RTM Parks and Recreation Committee has followed the budget process starting before the Commission voted on their budget request, giving input as the budget progressed through the town boards. Thank you to Pam Gary, who briefed our committee in January and was always ready to answer any questions, as was Lori Bora, Park and Rec Commission Chairman. In addition, our Budget Committee held a very productive meeting with our RTM Finance and Budget and Board of Finance buddies. Thank you to the town boards for making budget meetings accessible online. I firmly believe remote access has increased participation in the budget process. Thank you also to Jennifer Charneski for continued improvement to the accessibility of budget documents on the town website. The RTM Parks and Recreation Committee met on April 6th with all members present and voted unanimously in support of the Parks and Recreation portion of the 22-23 Selectmen's operating budget. We encourage the RTM to support this budget. Thanks.
Thank you, Adele. On behalf of Public Works, Rolf Oben, Chair.
Rolf Oben, District 4, Public Works Committee Chair. The Darien Department of Public Works operating budget for fiscal year 2022-23 is $4,654,965, an increase of 4% over the previous year. Roadway and walkway maintenance is the largest portion of the budget at $2,095,000, followed by the waste management budget of $1,313,000. And those two segments of the budget makes up 73% of the total, so that's really where the money's going. Public Works Department is responsible for all public town roads, sidewalks, storm drainage systems, street trees, 3 major public buildings, central rolling stock acquisition and maintenance, municipal parking lots, sanitary sewers, traffic signs and signals, pavement markings, solid waste disposal, and hazardous waste disposal. Based upon periodic checks and estimates of actual time spent performing job duties, staff salaries are allocated between the Public Works account, the general fund, the parking fund, and the sewer fund. The department's challenges are wide and varied for this coming fiscal year. Priority objectives are complete the construction of the Norotan and West intersection project, referred to as Lot SIP, continue implementation of energy cost-saving measures, provide oversight of proposed town-wide utility upgrades via Aquarian and Eversource, continue to provide oversight of the 3 large construction projects in town, continue sidewalk repairs, replacements utilizing the 5-year plan, continue updating the town-wide storm sanitary sewer GIS data, that's digitization, excuse me, of all of the records of all the sewers throughout the town, which is extremely important so we know where they all are and what kind of shape they're in. Pardon me. Follow through on the conduct of 3 town-sponsored drainage studies scheduled for completion in May and September, and follow through on Old Kings Highway South and Rings End Bridge repairs. Follow through on Gorham's Pond Dam study and repair. The Public Works Committee met on April 7th with 10 of 13 members present. The committee voted unanimously to approve the Town of Darien Department of Public Works operating budget for fiscal year 2022-23 and recommends the same to the full RTM.
Thank you, Rolf. Speaking on behalf of Public Health and Safety, Mac Patrick, Chair.
Thanks, Seth. I'm Mac Patrick, District 5 Chair and Chair of Public Health and Safety. At the same meeting I referenced earlier, May 4th, we met with 9 of 15 members present to discuss aspects of the budget relating to police, fire, other public safety, and human services. The police budget has an overall increase of 2.4%, primarily driven by administrative and communication expenditures, increases with reduction in investigative and professional standards. 1 civilian dispatcher was added to the budget. The fire budget has an overall increase of 5.3%, primarily due to the Fire Commission moving 2 part-time inspectors to full-time, anticipating increased workloads with multiple large mixed-use developments coming on board. Hoarding and blight issues are stable. Savings continue in the areas of software maintenance. It should be noted that the budget for the total fire department is $1.8 million versus almost $9 million for police. The town greatly benefits from an all-volunteer fire department. The emergency medical service, or post-53 budget, is down almost $20,000 or 12% and is related to reduced expenditures on professional services. It is noteworthy that the high school staffing of post-53 is all volunteer and much of the operation is self-funded through donations. Town funding is about $144,000 and the average response time is 6.5 minutes. There are 1,660 annual incidents, about 4 to 5 per day. It's incredible. Human services for the town include human services and outside assistance, the senior center, senior transportation, youth services, and the public health department. The overall budget is up slightly at 0.6% due to increased senior center and youth services expenditures. The youth services budget is up 1% due to strong enrollments to various programs, with an anticipated $73,000 increase in revenue. Senior transportation is down about 14.5%, a reduction in part-time salary. The public health department's budget is up slightly at 0.5%, with increases in personnel and contractual services. This budget of $368,000 receives revenues of $130,000 from licenses and permits. Public health and safety voted 8 in favor with 1 abstention to support these aspects of the budget, and we ask that you do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Mac. Are there any other committees that wish to report? Great. Any town officials who have any comments? Okay. Any members of the RTM comments? Members of the public? Yes. Someone in the back there? Thank you. Just come down here, ma'am, and identify who you are and what your address is here in town. I'll give you 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Luz Bueno. I live on 123 Hoyt Street. Have lived in Darien for 14 years. There is a bomb waiting to explode at the swap shop. It has to be addressed. There is an army of volunteers occupying all the parking spaces, fighting over the items. It's a chaos. There are people parking across the street, crossing the road with kids, with dogs. Babysitters taking the kids, the cars they work for, and leaving the kids sleeping in the car to go to swap shop and grab things to sell. The volunteers have an operation with residents in town that are part of the operation, and Mr. Lancetti, part of the operation. They pick up all these items and they sell them for profit.
Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to hold the comment.
Okay.
I would go to the Board of Selectmen and talk about it. It's not here. We're dealing with the town budget today.
Well,
We don't have any way to deal with your comment other than to
should be
listen to it.
in the budget, because
you.
what is the insurance that we have? What is the cost? What insurance do we have for any event happening at the swap shop?
Yeah, that you would have to take up with the Board of Selectmen. It starts there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, ready to vote? Those in favor, please rise. Item 22-12A passed 71 in favor, no noes, no abstentions.
Yeah, we don't, but it was out. I was just waiting for somebody to trip on it. Yeah, so was I.
The next item is 22-12C, Education Operating Budget. Speaking on behalf of the Education Committee, Ed Washeka.
Hi, I'm Ed Washeka, District 3, Chairman of the Education Committee of the RTM. The RTM Education Committee met on Monday, May 2nd, with 16 of 17 members present. The committee had also met and discussed the budget on January 17th, February 7th, March 14th, and April 4th. Oh, sorry, yes. Yes, thank you. I move the resolution 22-12C, the Board of Education operating budget. I don't have the text for the resolution. Do I have a second?
Yes, ask for permission to not read.
Permission to not read the resolution.
Get a second first. Get a second first.
Oh, please. Can I have a second?
Yeah.
With your permission, I will not read the resolution, nor will I read the first paragraph of what I just said. It is the RTM Education Committee's job to thoroughly examine the Board of Education operating budget and make a recommendation to the full RTM on whether the budget represents the best investment in our schools at a reasonable cost to the taxpayers. Tonight, we can make that recommendation. As in prior years, members of the committee joined the budget presentations by department heads and administration staff to the Board of Education on January 8th. Throughout the months leading up to the budget presentation, many committee members attend or watch Board of Education meetings and review Board of Education meeting packages. This year's budget was focused on supporting the district's strategic plan, making incremental enhancements with modest new funding requests, attempting to realize efficiencies and adjusting to life with COVID. We credit the administration, the staff, students and parents, the Board of Education, and the taxpayers for providing a learning environment that allows Darien to be recognized as a leading school system in the state. The Board of Education operating budget, as approved by the Board of Finance, is $110,607,016, an increase of 3.7% over the previous year, and a compound annual growth rate of approximately 3% annually over the past 4 years. The cash portion of the excess cost reimbursement, which serves to reduce our annual funding cost, was in line with prior years. As in prior budgets, the large majority of costs are for personnel expenses. Members of the committee routinely focus on the increases in headcount as well as increases in costs for salaries and benefits. Committee members encourage the administration to collaborate and share resources where sensible with the town or to explore outsourcing or efficiency-enhancing opportunities. We applaud the administration's steps in this area, but some of us believe an effort from members of town government, the school district, the RTM, and others might generate additional ideas as part of a plan that spans more than a single budget cycle. Quoting from last year's report to the RTM, the committee expressed concern that the town would not be able to sustain 4% annual increases and encouraged the administration to reflect on this. We are pleased to see this year's budget below 4%. Lower than many other schools in our reference group, and coupled with an increase in the mill rate of only 2.3%. The primary drivers in the budget are contractual wage increases, $1.6 million, health insurance cost increases of $1 million. The administration also expects $0.2 million in costs due to enrollment increases, $0.3 million from IEP costs, and expects to spend $500,000 on new investments, net of reductions for enhanced cost offerings, technology changes, and other improvements. The budget as presented includes cuts of roughly $200,000 from the Board of Education, most of which came from the reduction of 2.6 FTEs from 9.1 FTEs originally requested by the administration. We will likely see costs in the future for some of these FTEs that are funded by grants in this year's budget. The committee did not spend as much time on FTE changes as it had in prior years. We are not saying these positions are not needed, but in prior budgets, we might have seen more debate amongst the board and RTM committees on the necessities, trade-offs, or alternatives to these positions. Turning to the process of finalizing this budget, nearly the entire committee felt the process could be improved. In particular, we found the add-cut process to be, quote-unquote, unnecessarily unhelpful, if I can use the term. To summarize the add-cut process, individual board members can make motions to add or cut individual line items, or multiple line items in the budget. Board members do not have to give a reason for their proposal, although sometimes they do. The administration and committees like ours are left to divine the reasoning behind these cuts and to wonder about the potential impact until the next meeting when the additions and cuts are voted on by the board. This process, in our opinion, creates unnecessary drama. We feel that board members would better serve their constituents to explain their reasoning for making proposed cuts or additions. Additionally, we recognize that board members themselves have limited ability to drive quote-unquote top-level change in the budget. For example, if a board member wants to cut the budget by $1 million or to understand what priorities warrant trade-offs or reductions elsewhere, he or she doesn't have a route to a clear answer in the operating budget process. So rather than a top-level request to see a $1 million reduction, board members are left to create bottoms-up reductions by making the line item cut motions. It seems to many of us there should be a better way. And to reiterate, if the current ad-cut process continues to be used, we strongly encourage board members to include a rationale or a goal for the addition or cut. Our committee spent the most time discussing a program with a relatively modest budget impact, open choice. This topic engendered passionate discussion from many members over repeated meetings, as it did from the community. The Board of Education removed the program from the administration budget, which had a slightly negative impact, $35,000. Several members of the committee suggested we vote on this program, even though it was not in the budget, although no one ever made such a motion or formally asked me to add it to the agenda. But given the strong support expressed by many members of the committee, as well as the board's stated interest in considering the program next year, we thought it was important to highlight the program for the broader RTM. Whether the administration proposes open choice in the same form or on a smaller scale, or proposes an alternative program to enhance diversity in Darien, the recorded meetings of the committee show its members' strong support for open choice. The committee did also not spend much time discussing the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative. This topic took up enormous time in public comment during Board of Education meetings, with passionate arguments in favor and against it, which is why I highlight it here. But the cost represents 1/3 of 1% in the budget. Given the RTM is nonpartisan, we may naively wonder why so much air was devoted to fighting against it. The administration needs to be able to hire professional staff to support its strategic plan, and fostering a culture that promotes wellness, diversity, and inclusion as part of that plan. We want to thank our superintendent, our teachers, and our support staff for keeping Darien at the forefront of public education in Connecticut, and for delivering a budget that provides value to taxpayers. The Education Committee voted unanimously to approve the appropriation for the Board of Education operating budget of $110,607,016 and asked that the RTM do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
Thanks, Ed. Now, speaking on behalf of the Finance and Budget Committee, Jack Davis, Chair.
I'm Jack Davis, District 3, Chair of the Finance and Budget Committee. I'd like to thank Ed for a wonderful report. I'm not going to repeat a lot of things, but I'm going to start over here. Once again, guidance was 3%. One of the main drivers was 9.1 FTE increase. I was gobsmacked to see during the Board of Finance that number was not mentioned. If you're going to issue guidance, you have to address it. The superintendent's initial presentation of budget allowed us to work with this. I then worked with Rich Woodle, and we were able to identify core versus growth. It was very obvious in the initiation of both the town and the Board of Ed budget that really achieving a 2.5% core increase was not going to be possible, not by what the drivers were. So in looking at core, the core growth based upon our analysis is about 3.3%, well above even the 3% guidance. This is again why we're saying, please meet with these boards because they know what's going on and we have to have a sense of reality here. When, going to slide 12, sorry. For the core, we have enrollment-driven hires. So the, either through enrollment or IEP, we have a classroom teacher, 2 paras, PE teacher, an LPN, and a special ed teacher. That accounted for 4.2 of the new hires that were there. Other areas which we considered growth was bursar, the moving teaching Mandarin at middle school, the custodian Ox Ridge. By the way, talking about reality, in conversations with both Kate Bush and with Rich and Duke, I already know that we're having additional FTEs coming into the system for fiscal year '24. We know that Ox Ridge is opening up. They're having a new custodian this year. It's a bigger school. They're holding off to see if they really need a second custodian because nobody wants to just rush in with it. But these are the things that we should be discussing before we set guidance. There's fixed costs associated with the benefit, as mentioned, and the benefit healthcare that I have here. This is sans the new hires that they have, but $1 million in healthcare, over 8%, is a big driver of this budget. There is some incremental costs in heating, public transportation, I mentioned. It's my understanding that one of the school districts locally considered canceling school one day during the winter because they didn't have enough bus drivers to get their kids to school. This is a problem. Our contract is up 4%, and the cost for the diesel that we pay for those buses are up as well. We have new operations, some courses. We talked about the Mandarin that's going on, some new software. Although we're using a higher rate for excess cost reimbursement, reimburses us over a stated amount for our special ed students, the amount that we're anticipating that we will be submitting to the state is lower, so that's actually lower than what we budgeted for the current year. And then there's some changes in income that the Board of Ed did. On the core side, ELP, DSS, and facility rentals and IT. There's a change in how much is being allocated from the student parking fund into the Board of Ed coffers, as well as gate receipts from certain programs. What Ed discussed that the RTM education talked about, there was more conversation about open choice, DEA, and bring your own devices, which net is maybe $50,000 to a $100 million budget, than there were with the other things that are driving this budget. It was a great disappointment. And some of the cuts that were proposed, we still are waiting to hear why they were initiated, and it's a waste of both other board members' time and the RTM's time and the administration time. The basic proposal that F&B does have over the time that I've been part of it is we've hired administrators, we've elected Board of Ed members, and so when it comes to whether or not we're doing something educational or for the social-emotional needs of our students, we typically do not challenge. Want to add an administrator? We're going to ask you why. Want to ask another staff member? We're going to ask you why. And in fact, when I walked in to do this with Rich, I didn't even have to go to the first comment, besides he already knew which of the FTEs that are on the growth side that I can't say that I'm overly happy with. Again, we vote a total appropriation for the Board of Ed because while we fund them, their authority comes from the state. And even if we were to say we wanted to cut that position, they could still do it. So it's not worthwhile right now, but they understand, and we fully agree in F&B, that even a 3.79, although we can substantiate the reasons why for this, we cannot continue with it. And the fact that our mill rate is low is based upon a whole other series of things that I think when we finally show it, that's the crescendo of my presentation, is just not sustainable. So F&B met on the 6th. We voted unanimously on this Board of Ed, and we wanted to thank the town administration, school administration, and Duke for their assistance in working with us on this budget.
Thank you, Jack. Are there any other committees wish to report on this? Seeing none, any comments from town officials? Yes, Mr. Radley.
Mr. Moderator, good evening, everybody. Just as we hopefully transition out of the pandemic, yes,
Yeah, sure. Here, you got the floor.
Yeah, no,
Get on the mic.
want to do it from there, Mr. Moderator?
Yep.
If you'd like to, that's fine.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to take a wee moment real quickly with this budget, and as we hopefully transition out of the pandemic, I just wanted to thank you in anticipation for this evening, for your support of our students, and particularly during the period of the pandemic, for your ongoing support of the budget, also for your encouragement of our young people, and also for our staff. They have responded in kind. And I also want to thank you deeply for your support for the building projects that will serve our young people today and also for generations to come. So just thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Radley. Members of the RTM? I see no questions. Members of the public? Yes, miss. Could you give us your name?
This budget.
Could you give me your name a little bit
An address.
louder?
Luz Bueno, 123 Hoyt Street. So this budget of the education is looking more and more like a psychiatric center. So what about if we stop hiring psychiatrists and we start having the kids have more fun? What about some entertainment and some happiness for the kids to stop hurting themselves? I mean, this is incredible that kids that have all this privilege are committing suicide in town. So what about if there is less, buildings, but more fun for the kids to make happy memories and come back to this town or want to come back to this town one day? What happened to that in the budget? Because the expense in psychiatrists is incredible.
Do you have any specific recommendation regarding the
Yeah,
budget?
I have a recommendation to actually add to the budget fun for the kids, stuff that is fun for the kids. What happened with ice cream trucks and parties? The other day they had a movie night and they didn't even have a movie screen. What about fun for the kids in the budget and not just psychiatrists and therapists and drugs and medications?
Thank you. Appreciate your comment. Any other comments? Ready to vote? All those in favor, please rise. I'm thinking acclamation on the next one.
I'm actually going to do acclamation. You don't need to say anything.
No votes, please? Abstentions? Okay, next item is 22-12D. On behalf of the Finance and Budget Committee, Jack Davis.
Channel 79, slide 13. This one's going to be quick. I'm Jack Davis, District 3, Chair of the Finance and Budget Committee. I move 2212D, resolved that the above appropriation totaling $159,044,090 are for the purpose of meeting the expenses of the town of Darien for the fiscal year commencing July 1st, 2022, and ending June 30th, 2023, as shown by the budget this day approved. We have always done this through acclamation, so all in favor say aye, and we can move to the next.
Are there any, I just want to check, any objections? Okay. Go ahead, Jack. Sorry, Jack.
That's all right. All right.
All those in favor, please? Aye. Noes? Abstentions? You're on, Jack.
We were on before. All right, moving this along.
Next one is 22-12E.
I'm Jack Davis, District 3, Chair of the F&B Committee. I move 2212E, resolved that a tax of 17.23 mils is hereby levied upon the last complete grand list of the town with the total net assessment of $8,795,449,285 on the property as of October 1st, 2021, payable in 2 equal semi-annual installments, the first installment to become due and payable on July 1st, 2022, and the second installment to become due and payable on July 1st, 2023, provided, however, that any taxpayer may pay both of said installments on July 1st, 2022. The personal property tax on motor vehicles in said town shall become due and payable in a single installment on July 1st, 2022. Any property tax in any amount not in excess of $100 shall become due and payable in a single installment on 2022. Do I have a second? I see Mark Adaletta for the second. Okay, we're moving on to slide 14. Our grand list is up. It's up a lot. It's up more than I've ever seen in all the time doing this without a reval. An adjustment was made. We take our grand list. We do certain adjustments to it. One of the adjustments is state and local tax relief. You know, our volunteers, some of them get $1,000 off their property taxes, real estate of that. An evaluation was done on what we had been accruing over the last couple of years, and we realized that we had too much in there. So our town administrator and director of finance reduced that to be more appropriate, reducing the credits by $2.6 million, or a 6% decrease. That brought our grand list down to $8.7 billion. We then calculate what the collection rate has been for the last 5 years. And we take away 25 basis points. Now, that gives us a little cushion of about $300,000 to $400,000. Not bad, but we end up using it. The grand list that I have on this board is not going to be, I promise you, the grand list for which taxes are assessed on July 1st. There are always adjustments. Some go up, some go down. The 25 basis points is to account for those adjustments that happen every year. So, our increase in the tax collection rate is up by 2 basis points. So we have our adjusted grand list. We take the amount that we needed to raise from taxes, and you can see it's at 4.5%. So if we have to raise more taxes, how come the mill rate is only going up 2%? Next slide. What I've done is reconcile the mill rate for us so we understand how we're paying for things and what things we're paying for aren't going to be there every year. Again, what we do is we start off with the initial requested capital, the town budget, sans their little 1.2 million capital, and the Board of Ed operating budget, and we come up. Now, we've already talked about in 2212A that we're moving the fire engines off cycle. We used ARPA funds to pay for some of our capital budget. We're proposing bonding on $1.3 million. We're using $100,000 out of the capital reserve because it was already too much money. And one of the capital for the Board of Ed being the Suburban, we moved over. That removed 55 basis points, because if I went to that first thing and we did none of these adjustments, our mill rate would have been 19.57%. My gosh, if that had happened, most of you would have fainted by now. We then transferred in $2.9 million because, remember, we overtaxed in the current year. We also have RNC revenues because we make money, we get STEM straight grants. That brings us down another 40 basis points, brings us down to 18.61. Now, the way I'm calculating, just for those who like to recalculate what's going on, all of the basis points in the mill rate are based upon last year's grand list, because that's the only way I can prove to what's really helping us this year. So we're down to special appropriation, and as you can see, the $159,044,90 is one of the numbers we've dealt with already. We're then closing out, if some of you have been around for a while, remember that the F&B started cleaning up some of the reserve accounts that we had hanging around town and working with the Board of Finance, including having about $250,000 for Superstorm Sandy 6 years after the storm had occurred. And we put that back into the grand list. We paid down some debt. One of the funds that was still around is a $100 special ed fund. We're finally closing that out, basically because the $100,000 wouldn't do anything if there was an emergency in special ed, and we just do an appropriation, which we have done in the past. But it's being closed into revenue. That's not going to happen again. We have other non-tax revenue that's up by another $200,000. You heard some of it by some of the additional revenues that are being done around the town. And the revenue, which is a typical thing that we take away from the funds needed to be raised, is reducing that by another 100 basis points. So now we're down to the funds that needed to be raised by taxes, which actually is the same number that we showed you on the prior slide, of $150,898, which would say that we're at a mill rate of 17.77. But here's where it all came down to. The increase in the grand list by 1.93%, the lowering of the tax relief, the increasing of what our collection rate will be, even with the 25 basis points, is generating $2.8 million of revenue. We cannot count on all of these things continuing on a continual basis. It is not sustainable. We need, especially with what might be on the horizon, and to maintain the good fiscal condition that this town is used to having, we need to rethink how we're doing budgets. We need to rethink how we're explaining budgets. We need to rethink how we're prioritizing the things that are in our budgets. And that's part of why we're here. Overall, this explains how we paid for things, and explains how, even though we're asking for 4.5% more, we end up with a 2.3% increase in our mill rate. And quite honestly, as everybody here knows, with a 2.3% increase in the mill rate, any suggestion to modify anything would be laughed out of this building. So we're all happy, as I said from the beginning, Everything's good in Lake Wobegon. We didn't increase our mill rate, but this isn't sustainable. And that's the position of F&B. We met, we voted in favor of this and recommend the same to the full RTM.
Thank you, Jack. Any other committees? Town officials? The body? Members of the RTM? Public? I see none. Looks like we're ready to vote. All those in favor, please rise. Opposed? See none. Abstentions? Great. Next item is 22-12F, borrowing of up to $5 million. On behalf of the Finance and Budget Committee, Jack Davis, Chair.
I'm Jack Davis, District 3, Chair of the Finance and Budget Committee. I move 2212F, resolved that the Town of Darien, acting through the Board of Selectmen and subject to the approval of said town at the annual budget meeting of the representative town meeting to be held May 9th, 2022, be authorized to borrow on the note or notes of the town the sum of $5 million or so much thereof as may be necessary for the general expenses of the town pending the collection of either or both of said semi-annual installments of taxes on or prior to June 30th, 2023. Do I have a second? I see Rolf doing the second. Real short meeting here. A couple years ago on the pandemic, we moved this to $10 million. Didn't matter. Last year, we moved it back down to 5. I don't think we've ever borrowed against this. It's though based upon that we could borrow if we didn't collect all the taxes and we really had to make a payment, but it's supported by future tax collections of what we're going to do. But since we do collect about 90-something% of our 70 million, we do this just as a cash management tool. F&B met on it, we approved it, we expect the board to approve it, and we never expect to draw on it. We're ready to vote.
I sense this, yes. Just let me make sure that we don't miss something. Any other committees want to speak on this? Okay. Town officials, members of the RTM. Looks like we're ready to vote. All those in favor, please rise. No votes? Abstentions? See none? Next item is 22-12G. On behalf of the Finance and Budget Committee, Jack Davis, Chair.
I'm Jack Davis. I'm still chair, at least for now, of the Finance and Budget Committee. I move 2212G. The resolution resolved that the following appropriations for other funds are hereby made, detailed below, for the 22-23 fiscal year, as shown as the budget this day approved. Do I have a second? Oh, I see Patty has a second. Without objection, I'm not going to read the numbers. Basically, We have a new one this year in a self-funding item, which we've explained, but Park and Rec is going to explain that. So there's essentially 6 different appropriations for different funds. We have to do the appropriation. All the appropriations is self-funding, which means the fund that collects the revenues, user fees or taxes, automatically feeds the expenses for the service for which it provided. And with that, we're going to do a couple things new. We're going to have a report on the sewer funds, and we're also going to have a brief report on the new special appropriation fund. F&B met on this on April 6th, and we voted unanimously in favor and recommend the same to the full RTM. So, next one is
Great.
sewer fund.
Thank you, Jack. Next, for Public Works, Rolf Olben, Chair.
Rolf Oben, District 4, Public Works Committee Chair. The Sewer Commission operating budget for fiscal year 2022-2023 is $4,185,360, an increase of 0.28% over last year. Sewer funds are kept separate from other town funds and used exclusively for the purposes set forth in Connecticut general statutes. The Sewer Assessment Fund is $200,000. The Assessment Fund, as well as the operating fund, is supported by sewer service charges that are set annually. Appropriations in the Sewer Operations Fund are used to maintain, repair, and operate 81 miles of sewer mains, 14 pump stations, and a contribution to the Sewer Capital Fund. Contractual services are the largest portion of the budget at $3,428,000, followed by personnel costs of $558,000. The Sewer Capital Fund is $152,600, which is down 10% from the previous year. The capital fund is used for sewer projects and purchases exceeding $5,000 and having a useful life greater than 2 years. This year's funding is planned for chemical root control, pump replacement, equipment replacement, and collection systems rehabilitation. The RTM Public Works Committee met on April 28th with 9 of 12 committee members present. The committee voted unanimously to approve the Town of Darien Sewer Commission operating budget, sewer assessment, and sewer capital fund for fiscal year 2022-2023, and recommends the same to the full RTM.
Thank you, Rolf. Next, for the Park and Recreation Committee, Adele Coniff, Chair.
District 3 RTM Parks and Recreation Chairman, 22-12G. The Parks and Recreation Programs Fund is being established to identify actual revenues and expenses that result from various programs and special activities run by the Parks and Recreation Department. Program registration revenue and instructor expenditures will be recorded to this fund. Program fees are designed to fully cover the cost of running each program. Revenue in excess of expenditures will be transferred to the general fund to offset salary and other overhead expenses that will continue to be charged to the general fund. Program revenues, $950,000. Program expenses, $675,000. Transfer out to other funds, $275,000. Program registrations exceed expectations. Fall registration of 2021 versus 2020, up 29%. Winter registration 2022 versus winter 2021, up 53%. Spring registration 2022 versus spring 2021, up 10%. Summer registration 2022 versus summer of 2021, up 30% through April 12th. Once again, Parks and Recreation will need to come to the RTM in June to transfer funds because of increased program expenses due to increased program revenue. This fund will track program revenue and expenses and eliminate the need to return to the RTM when revenues and the resulting expenses exceed budgeted expectations. The RTM Parks and Recreation Committee met on April 6th with all members present and voted unanimously in support of the Parks and Recreation Programs Fund. We hope the RTM will support the creation of this fund. Thanks.
Thank you, Adele. Are there any other committees that wish to report? Town officials, any comments? Members of the RTM? I see none. Looks like we're ready to vote. All those in favor, please rise.
What?
Item 22-12E passed 71 yea, no noes, no abstentions. 22-12C passed 71 in favor, no noes, no abstentions. 22-12D passed by acclamation. And 22-12B had 70 yeas, 1 no, no abstentions. All items passed. Did we cover noes and abstentions? I didn't hear any, see any. Okay. The next item is 12-13, appropriation of $55.7 million for refunding certain of the town's bonds. On behalf of Finance and Budget, Jack Davis, Chair.
I'm Jack Davis, District 3 Chair of the RTM Finance and Budget Committee. I move 22-13, resolution appropriating $55,665,000 to refund certain of the town's outstanding bonds and authorizing the issuance of refunding bonds or amounts available in the unassigned fund balance to finance such appropriation. Do I have a second? If there's no objection, I will waive the reading of this, Joe. If there's no objection, I'll waive the reading of this resolution. This is the last resolution of the night. A couple of years ago, we made the change to add unassigned fund balance because after we cleaned up the reserve accounts, we wanted to pay down some debt and call it, and we realized we didn't have the authorization to do it, even though we had the cash. So we had to do the change, and now it's just already included. This is all of the ones that are callable, even if they may not be callable, but should there be a change in any of the state law dealing with municipal bonds, it gives the Board of Finance the authorization to do it. This resolution also rescinds virtually the same resolution we passed last year for a different dollar amount, however. And so this now becomes the new resolution going forward for the next fiscal year. F&B met on April 6th, and we voted in favor. And before I bid everyone adieu for the night, I want to thank everyone for their patience in laughing at some of my jokes. I also want to thank the Monica, Kate Bush, and Jen Chinesky, as well as Dr. Adley Rich and Duke for all of the work and the effort that they put in, as well as the F&B committee that attends a slew of meetings, and which I'm very fortunate to just be the spokesperson for a great team. Thank you.
Well, I just want to add that you can see the amount of work it takes to do this. This is not easy. And so I was going to suggest that we just give Jack a hand for all the work that he did. Are there any other committees that wish to report on this item? Okay. Town officials, the RTM. Seeing none, looks like we're ready to vote. All those in favor, please rise. I can't take a motion to adjourn this meeting until after this vote has been counted and announced. Just formality.
But while we're doing that, I don't want to be remiss by having Jim Palin call me up and say I didn't mention him. So I also want to thank the Board of Finance for working with them during the course of the year. because my phone will be blowing up in about 2 minutes.
No votes, please. Abstentions?
On the parking lot.
Oh, okay.
We didn't explain that one this year.
Make sure you.
We're
count
going
yourself.
to, we did it by approving it,
Right,
but we didn't explain it.
up here, right.
Yeah, my expert on parking isn't here, otherwise I would have deferred to them on the parking lots. Because some of the parking lots owned by the state, and some of it we own, and interesting enough, the person who wrote the definitive item on how to understand these parking funds was Kip Coons.
Yeah.
No, go figure. I mean, since we refer to it as the Coons lot. But yes, we didn't address exactly what they handle, but it's very similar that we have.
But did we approve
Yes, we
that
approved that.
within the-
Within the total,
we
we
didn't talk
approved it.
about it.
We just didn't talk about it. What I did is for the first time, because
Item,
we asked Adele to talk about
folks,
it.
item
And I also
22-12G, not
Ralph
the
to
one we're
address
counting now, but
sewer funds.
12G passed
Because rather than
71.
me saying, oh, this
Yay,
gets this,
no no's,
I
no
think
abstentions.
people should learn. And part of what I'm trying to do is re-educate. Yeah, I say the same thing all the time. You know, at home they tell me, Dad, I've heard that story 4 times. But the fact is that, you know, Ralph's done an excellent job. And they really watch these funds over there and there. I mean, they really do. Frank Alderman, I refer to as the town's Ed Norton, because that's one of the things that he works on in Exeter. And other than Ralph and Frank, from the RTM perspective, I don't think anybody understands those funds as well as those two. I should do. Mark Adeletta might also, from his time at being in. But, you know, they're really good. And so I thought, you know, why don't we talk about it? You know, instead of me talking.
Well, thank you very much.
No, I appreciate it. This will be sent out to everyone. I just didn't have the time to do it because I was still playing with numbers. Like, Jen is not in the office. Kate's in Normandy. So those are the 2 people I usually
Item 22-13. Hello,
And I
everybody.
It's an enormous job.
Give me a second
Well,
here.
it's an enormous job they have because they look at all my shit and tell me if I'm wrong.
Folks,
Thank you.
22-13 passed, 69 in favor, no votes, 2 abstentions. And I will accept the motion to adjourn. Oh, yeah, I see so many hands, I just, can I have a second, please? Wait, we have to vote, folks. All those in favor, please rise.
The lady sitting in the second row is Ralph Kiner's daughter.
Noes? Abstentions? I see none.
You're kidding me.